So now we're on the third of the three approaches to value. And I got to tell you, this is probably the least preferred method. Obviously, that would be the cost approach. It works pretty good when you're trying to, if you've got a very unique property, okay, where basically there's nothing that like it that has recently sold. And if that's the case, then obviously sales comparison is not going to be a big help. And it doesn't produce income. So that would not help. So the income approach would be out. So the only thing you've got left is the cost approach. Well, what kind of buildings are we talking about here? And they could ask you a question, something along the lines of which type property might require or best require the cost approach, and then you got to kind of pick and choose. Well, the one you want to look for obviously would be one that is not likely to have any sales comparisons. It means nothing like it has likely recently sold. It does not produce income. Then really the only thing left is cost approach. So, what could that be? Say a post office. How many post offices do you see for sale? Not much. You don't see a lot of post offices on the market. So if I were trying to figure out the value of a post office, you may not have any comparable sales to really look at. Well, does a post office make money? No. I'll have people want to argue with me and tell me that every time I go to the post office, I got to pay for this and pay for that. So it's making, no, it's not. First of all, that's the post office is owned by the government. The government, by definition, does not make money. They take money. And I will tell you, if anything, they lose money. So any money anyway, I won't get into that. Post office does not make money. So that takes out the sales comparison, takes out the income approach. So really the only thing you got left is the cost approach. Maybe a public library. You don't see libraries for sale very much. They don't make money to speak of. Some churches, not all, but some churches, I say not all, churches don't make money. I know they collect tithes and things, but that's based on tax laws. They're exempt. So there's really no income to speak of there. But occasionally you could, depending on the church, you may find a church that has some comparable sales. Typically, if it's a smaller church, you'll see that from time to time. But anyway, I think it shouldn't be too difficult to pick out of an option of 4, which one of these properties would best require or most likely require the cost approach. And by the way, another one they like to use for cost approach, or new homes. Without getting into the weeds here, obviously a lot of times new homes are really not comparable to one that's already been lived in, got some age on it and stuff like that. So if it's brand new, we'll definitely be taking a look at the cost approach. We'll also be looking at sales comparison. So we'll use probably both of those approaches to value. But with a new home, you're probably giving the most weight towards whatever the cost of that property would be. All right, but anyway, so how does this work? How does the cost approach work? Obviously, this could get very detailed and into the weeds if you were actually doing it, which obviously if you're not an appraiser, you're not going to be doing this. So again, not going to get deep. But really, all you really need to understand, at least for test purposes, are the steps involved in doing the cost approach. And as you see here, there are 5 steps. And I'll just go over them real quick, and then I'll show you sort of how they work. But 1, we have to estimate the value of the land. Y'all, just what's the land worth as if nothing else was on the land? If it was just vacant, what would just the vacant land be worth? Y'all, we got to figure that out. Step 2, we got to estimate what that replacement or reproduction cost would be. Y'all, what would it cost to build it? Y'all, if I'm appraising this building standing here in front of me and I had to rebuild it, how much would it cost to build it? Y'all, that's what we're talking about here. Now, you notice it says replacement or reproduction. Y'all, that's a pretty significant thing right there, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit more here in just a second. But then step 3, we have to estimate what that accrued depreciation would be. Y'all, because we'll have to depreciate. Y'all, assuming it's not a new construction, it'll have some wear and tear, and we'll have to depreciate. Then step 4, we'll subtract the estimated depreciation from cost new, add the value of the land, and that should give you the value of that property based on cost approach. All right, so now how does this work? So let's look at this. I kind of put the 5 steps up here in the corner just to kind of keep that in our, so we can kind of keep that in our mind as we go through. But you'll note, again, first step, we have to value, what's the value of just the land? So, y'all, let's just say the land is, we'll just say $100,000. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2, we got to figure out, well, what does it cost to rebuild it? Now, one of the first questions or decisions the appraiser will have to make, are we going to base this on reproduction or replacement? And it can matter depending on the property. Now, again, what I want you to keep in mind, obviously we're not actually going to build another property. We're trying to figure out if I did have to rebuild, then how much would that cost? Let's say you've got one of these older historic properties, a very historic property. Y'all built 100 years ago, 100 plus years ago. And let's say I'm appraising that. And again, based on cost approach. Well, when I'm appraising a 100-year-old or 100-plus-year-old historic property, would I want to use the reproduction or replacement method? And here's the difference. If I decide to use reproduction, that means I must determine the cost to rebuild, assuming we use the exact same material, and I mean an exact reproduction of that property. So the property or the material they used 100 plus years ago, I have to assume that's what we're going to use here to rebuild and then base the cost on that. Or I could use the replacement method, which means we'll use materials that are much more commonly used today. It just will look like the material they used 100 years ago. Which one would cost more to do? Or would either one cost more than the other? It could. Especially you get into a situation like an historic property that's over 100 years old. Even if you could find that exact material they used 100 years ago, it's going to be very expensive. More than likely, it's going to be very expensive to rebuild that property using the exact same material. Versus if they just use materials that are more commonly used today, they're more readily available, they're much more cheaper, economical, but we can make it look like it's 100-year-old material, right? So which one would we use? Because that's a decision we're going to have to make. Well, I will tell you, if it's a 100-year-old property, historical property, the value is in the 100-year-old property. It's not the floor plan typically. If you think about it, if you've ever been in these old homes, a lot of times they feel like you're walking through a maze. You usually got very narrow hallways and they're going all over the place. that is not what people or the typical buyer would expect or prefer to get today. What do we want today? Open. We want the open concept. Most buyers, you go in a 100-year-old home, they'd want to take out 80% of the walls. We got to take out all these walls. We want the whole floor to be open. That's not the way they built things 100 years ago, right? We just didn't do that. Not suggesting one's better or worse than the other. It's just not the preference that buyers would be looking for today. So the value is not in the floor plan. The value is in the material, the way it was built. So, so if I'm valuing an older historical property like this, then I'm probably going to choose to use the reproduction approach because that's where the value is. Now, I'll tell you, in the house I live in today, 30, 40 years old, something like that, it really wouldn't matter whether I use reproduction or replacement because at the end of the day, it's the same cheap material. When this house was built, it was not an extravagant house, still isn't an extravagant house. Did not use high-end materials like most houses. So, honestly, it wouldn't matter if you tried to use reproduction or replacement. It's going to wind up being the same cheap material. But every now and then, depending on the property, that reproduction can come in, might be a big deal. Okay, anyway, just let you know there. So, but let's just say, again, for step 2, we made our decision on reproduction or replacement, and it's going to cost, let's say, $200,000 to build that house again if we had to build it again today. All right. Now, step 3, now we got to estimate what this accrued depreciation is going to be. Because obviously the $200,000 we've got here, that's what it would cost brand new. Again, we're not actually building the house. I'm appraising one that's standing in front of me, and it's not brand new. It might be 50 years old. It's got some wear and tear. It's got some things that need to be repaired, fixed, replaced, whatever. So we have to depreciate for that, right? Now, you'll see here in parentheses a term called economic life. I don't know that they'll get into this on the state exam, but I don't know that they won't either. So let me make sure we kind of at least have some understanding of what this economic life is about. What we're going to do, you can't take, let's say you got 2 houses, identical homes, for the most part. But say they're both 50 years old, built by the same build, same material, same floor plan, everything. Everything's the same. But they're both 50 years old. Well, the house, one of the houses, or the owners, has decided to remodel. Maybe they've replaced the roof. They've replaced the kitchen, or redone the kitchen. They've redone the bathrooms, put in new flooring, put in a new heating and air unit. And the list could go on and on and on. Where the other guy hasn't done any of that, right? So I guess what I want you to understand or see is this, and I get this a lot from when I do appraisals. I'll get questions from agents, and they'll say, well, Frankie, the house that we're asking you to appraise is 20 years old. You used a comparable that's 50 years old. That's not a comparable. Well, it may be, and I can assure you if I used it, then it is. Because, we don't base depreciation on the actual age of the property. The fact that this one owner that did all these renovations and basically replaced all the mechanical systems and stuff in the house, because of all the stuff they did to the house, they've created more life, right? They've created life. So, so say for example, you have a house that again, the other house, say it's 50 years old, and they never ever do anything to it. If something breaks, it stays broke. If a pipe starts leaking, it continues to leak. We never ever fix it. Y'all, could you see where, say, by the time it's 50 years old, it could, in essence, have zero value because it has not been maintained. In fact, all you do now pretty much is just tear it down. So it has no value. But the house that had all this work done, not only did they keep up maintaining it, y'all, they've actually turned it into they've renovated and almost looks new again. Well, y'all, that house has an economic life of maybe, 20 years old, 25 years old. Because the more you do to the property, you've added life to it, right? If you don't maintain it, it's going to depreciate down to nothing. But when you start doing stuff to it, you're creating more life for that more economic life. So in essence, the property I'm appraising might be 20 years old, and the house I'm using as a comp might be 50 years old, or at least the actual age, but because of all the stuff they've done to this house, the economic life might be 25 years old. So now we're basically comparing apples to apples. It's much more even. But y'all, that's what they're talking about, economic life, okay? But y'all, at the end of the day, we got to estimate what that depreciation is going to be. And, we're just going to make up a number and say $50,000. So we know we're going to have to subtract $50,000 for depreciation. Then, in fact, that's step 4. So that's going to leave us with $150,000, right? Well, then the last step, we got to add back the value of the land. And we said the land was $100,000. So the appraised value in this example would be $250,000. Okay. That's not hard. Okay. At least for what you got to know how to do. What we just did here is not that hard if you can remember those 5 steps. But here's what, if you don't remember anything else about what we just went over here, here's what you better remember. I'd pay attention to step 1, where basically we're having to determine the value of just the land, right? So the land is $100,000, and we're saying the improvement, or in this case, the house, is worth $200,000 new, that's before we depreciate. So why do we have to subtract out or set aside the value of the land before we can do steps 2 through 5? This is what you better know. You can never depreciate land. Land does not depreciate. Okay? So we have to separate the value of the land. We've got to separate that from the value of the improvement, because we do have to depreciate the improvement. But you cannot include the land in the depreciation. Remember that. I promise you, somehow they're going to ask you a question on the exam. How they ask it, I don't know. But I promise you better know you cannot ever depreciate land. I would remember that, because they will ask that question. All right, so that's the cost approach. That's all there is to it. Now you know all 3 approaches to the cost approach. Let me restate that. I'll wake up. We'll be okay here in a second. Now that you know all 3 approaches to value, this should be very helpful. You certainly know everything you need to know for the exam when it comes to these approaches. But now let's go a little bit deeper into this appraisal or valuation process, because we just talked about some depreciation, and now we're going to look at some different types of depreciation. And and you need to be familiar with the different types of depreciation. One is physical deterioration. It's just normal wear and tear. In fact, that's exactly what I was just referring to just a moment ago in the cost approach. If you don't maintain the property, you don't fix things as they need fixing, after a period of time, you got a problem. As you can see in the picture there, that house has not been maintained very well. We're going to have to depreciate the value of that property for sure, right? Just normal wear and tear. That's physical deterioration. But here's the one you want to be careful with when you get out there, and that's what we call functional obsolescence. First of all, what is obsolescence? It just means depreciation. That's all they're referring to. So functional obsolescence just means that maybe when the house was built, it was typical. It was what most people preferred, what most people wanted. But today, it's just not considered very functional today. So it may be considered a functional obsolescence, which means we will have to depreciate for whatever that obsolescence is. Now, when you look at this picture here, do you see anything in that picture that looks like it might not be exactly functional? And you probably notice, they got a toilet right there in the kitchen. That's not very functional today. Most people would not prefer to have the toilet right there by their sink and stove. I don't know if y'all noticed in this picture or not, but that's a brand new toilet. They had some of this stuff replaced for this appraisal. In fact, you can still see the sticker on the back of the toilet. And the stove is new. I don't know if you can tell it in the photo, but had to depreciate for that. Not considered very functional today. But anyway, but let me give you a couple examples of a more common or more typical functional obsolescence. If you've got a house, say has 4 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, most people will consider that a functional obsolescence. Anybody wanting or needing 4 bedrooms, they're going to need more than 1 bathroom. And if all you got is 1 bathroom, I promise you that's going to hurt the sales price big time. I actually was appraising a house some time ago. And this was a little over 3,000, probably around 3,200 square foot home. A very nice home. Very nice. The problem that home had, there were only 2 bedrooms. 2 bedrooms and an over 3,000 square foot home. I promise you, anybody looking for a 3,000 square foot home, they're going to expect more than 2 bedrooms. In fact, I can tell you, in a 1,000 square foot home, they probably want more than 2 bedrooms. But that was going to create a functional obsolescence. Not long ago, I was appraising a house, and it was a very long ranch style home. It was very long. And there was a wall that went right down the center of the house. It was just a wall. All the, parallel, from one end of the house basically to the other, and there was only 1 doorway. So the only way to get from this side of the house over to that side of the house, I may have to walk all the way to the very end to walk through the doorway and then come back to wherever I'm trying to go to. I'm just telling you, that's a functional obsolescence for most people. So, that should not be a very difficult thing to understand. It's just not very functional. And because of that, that's going to depreciate the value in a typical buyer's mind. Like, I like the house, but I don't like the idea that I got to walk all the way to the end of the house, to go through a door to get back to the other end on the other side of the house. It's just not very functional the way that was laid out at all. All right, so that's functional obsolescence. But then we look at this external obsolescence. Y'all, this is another key issue you better pay attention to. I'm talking about in the real world when you're out there practicing, because y'all, this can be a problem. Y'all, external obsolescence just means there's something external to your property that's going to cause your property to depreciate in value. Y'all, that could be any number of things. Maybe your house sits underneath or very close to the runway at an airport. So you got these planes or jets flying over your house all day, every day, all night. Most people not going to like that, okay? Because they make a lot of racket, a lot of noise, quite frankly. Maybe your house sits very close to a major highway, interstate maybe. A lot of noise, a lot of congestion. That could create depreciation on your property. Maybe your house sits very close to a railroad track. So it seems like at 2 o'clock every single morning, a freight train sounds like it's coming right through your living room. That's going to cause problems. But probably the most common issue is your next door neighbor. Doesn't even have to be right next door. It could be anywhere in the vicinity of where your house is. But your neighbors can create depreciation for your property. If they're not maintaining their property, does not look nice, that's going to affect who's willing to live here near them, and two, how much they'd be willing to pay to live near them, right? If your neighbor's the one that's got his Camaro parked out on the front lawn, put up on concrete blocks, jacked up on concrete blocks, got a pit bull tied to the bumper, beer cans thrown out the front door, not the typical buyer's not going to want that person as a neighbor. That's going to cause depreciation for your property. So these are things that I'm telling you, in the real world, when you're actually practicing real estate, you got to learn to pay attention to. I would, the house the house I'm showing my buyer might be really nice. Perfect house, exactly what my buyer's looking for, but my goodness, look what the neighbor's doing next door or whatever. Because that's going to hurt. I promise you, that's going to hurt. But that's what we call an external obsolescence. Now, some of this depreciation we just talked about is curable. You can fix it. Some of it's not. Okay? Well, which is which? Well, for example, the functional obsolescence, the physical obsolescence or deterioration, those things are typically curable. You can fix those problems. If you got wear and tear, replace it, fix it, maintain, whatever. You can create value by just taking care of that. If you got a functional obsolescence, for example, that 4 bedrooms and only 1 bath, a lot of times you could add a bathroom, and I will tell you that will create more value. So typically your physical deterioration, your functional obsolescence, that's curable. But if you've got an external obsolescence, you're probably stuck with what you got there. There's just typically nothing you can do about it. A lot of times there's nothing you can do about what the neighbor's doing or not doing. If you live by the airport or near an airport and you got planes flying over, you're not going to stop that. So those kind of things might be considered incurable for sure. So anyway, all right. Next thing we can take a look at are these methods to estimate cost. Honestly, I don't know how deep they're going to get on the exam here. I haven't had really anybody tell me that they got many questions about this on the exam. But if you're going to get a question on the exam, what I suspect they would ask you, at least out of this section here, is this square footage comparison. That's for the most part Y'all, that's how we're going to try to determine the value of the property. It's based on the price per square foot, okay? We use it in the sales comparison approach, because y'all, obviously we will have to make adjustments like we did when we went through sales comparison. Y'all, you got to make adjustments for the difference in square footage, and all of that's based on that per square foot cost or price, right? So the best way to estimate cost is going to be the square footage comparison. Now, some other ways, and I'm just going to touch on them real quick. Y'all, the quantity survey is used in determining the cost to produce or build the property. Obviously, that's what using the cost approach, which again is not the most preferred approach at all. They could consider the unit in place, and it says that's the modification of the quantity survey, which includes items priced as if they were already installed. If I'm going to, trying to think of an example here, but if I'm going to have an addition of some sort, I know what the cost of materials would be, but then you got to consider the labor involved. So the unit in place is when I'm determining the value as if it's already in place. May not actually be there, but that's what I'm using to value the property, as if it's already done. Okay, not just the cost of material, but what it would also cost to install. Okay, and then there's the comparative method. And that's when you take a known replacement cost and reduce it down to the cost per square foot. Okay. But like I said, which one do we want to use? Square footage analysis. That's probably the best one. And then, y'all, we kind of touched on this already, but a little bit of a review here. Y'all, you as a real estate agent cannot do an appraisal. Right? And they'll probably ask you again on the exam questions to make sure you know you cannot do appraisals, and you better not even suggest that the analysis you did do is an appraisal. You can't go to and say, hey, look, I've pulled some comps, and based on my analysis, I think your house would appraise for X amount. If you use the term appraise, you're going to get in a world of trouble. If you're not a licensed appraiser, you cannot suggest what something would appraise for. That's a no-no. So we can't call our work an appraisal. So what do we call it? A comparative market analysis, or CMA. You hear that acronym used a lot. But y'all, this is what real estate agents use. The market analysis. Now, which of the three approaches to value would be the best approach to do your market analysis? They'll probably ask you that question. Sales comparison approach. That's the one you're going to be using way more often than not. We know we got to make adjustments. You can't just take what comparable property sold for. If you don't make the adjustments, you're going to be tens of thousands of dollars off. Where do we get this information? Well, a lot of it we'll get, if not almost all of it, you'll probably get right out of the MLS, the multiple listing service. But you could go on the county records, tax records, and look up information about property that way. But that last bullet, again, and I know I've said it and I'm going to say it again, if you have good and at least 3 good comparable properties, then you're probably going to be okay doing a market analysis, and you should be really, really close, as long as you, again, make the adjustments and things that are necessary. But if the comps are not there, there's too much money at stake for you to start guessing on this kind of stuff. Just tell the homeowner. Just tell them there are no comps that I'm comfortable with, or at least not enough comps that I'm comfortable with in trying to help you or assist you in determining the list price. So I'm going to have to recommend we get this house appraised. Let's just get it appraised. That way we know it's done by a professional, hopefully. And even if you paid the $400 or even $500 for the appraisal, I'm just telling you, if you're guessing, you're going to be off way more than the cost of that appraisal. Way more. Because you're going to likely be in the thousands, if not the tens of thousands of dollars off. What we don't know is, are you way too high or are you way too low? And neither one are too good. I'm telling you, just bite the bullet, you or the seller, whoever wants to pay for it, that's up to y'all. But I'd highly recommend you just get it appraised. Because I'm telling you, you start guessing, you're opening the door to potentially some legal problems. So y'all just be careful about this. When we're dealing with money, people hold on tight, and if they feel like you messed up or you did something wrong and it cost them money, this is where you might need an attorney. So, and I'm not saying that to scare you, but I'm just telling you, you're supposed to be protecting the interest of your client. Guessing on what the property value is not in the best interest of your client. That's a no-no. So again, if the comps are there and you feel comfortable with it, do your market analysis and go with it. But if the comps aren't there, that's when you need to back up and punt. We need some help. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're not an appraiser. Don't try to act like one. All right. Then you see this section on similar terms and use. I promise you're going to see questions on the exam about this, so let's make sure we understand it. But you see this term called broker price opinion, or BPO, and I'm sure, in good chance, you've probably heard of it or maybe be familiar with it. But if not, make sure you know what this is, a broker price opinion. Here's when you see this happen, or when we need it, is when the bank forecloses on a property. So if the bank has to foreclose and take the property back from whoever had the property, obviously what's the bank going to do with it? They're going to sell it. The bank is not in business to hold on to real estate. So they're going to sell the property. The problem the bank has, they don't know what the property's worth. Don't have a clue. Chances are they've never been to the property. Obviously they know how much they loaned on the property. They know how much they're still owed on the property. That's got nothing to do with what that property is worth today. Because a lot of times, and I'm sure you're aware of this, people that are losing their homes to foreclosure, they're mad at the bank, they're mad at the world, and I get it. And we just want to, but all of a sudden the bank's the bad guy, and we're going to make them pay. So they go in and just start ripping stuff out, stealing stuff, taking out the kitchen cabinet, anything they can unscrew or pry loose, they take it with them. And what they can't take, they tear it up, knock holes in the wall, just destroy the property. I'm just telling you, that is not a good idea at all. You're going to regret you ever did that. I don't care how good it might make you feel at the moment. That's going to be a very costly mistake you just made to do that. But anyway, putting that aside, so the bank has to know how much they can sell it for based on the condition it's in. Well, how do they do that? Well, they could hire an appraiser to actually go out and appraise the property, and a lot of times they do. But what banks have also figured out is a way to save some money, where they could actually pay a real estate agent, not an appraiser, but a real estate agent to go out and just do a market analysis. So basically what the bank is saying is this: I want you to go look at this property, and if you, and big key word here, if you were to list and try to sell this property, what do you think it's worth? What could you sell it for based on your market analysis? So basically, they're going to pay you to do a market analysis. It's just the bank does not call it a market analysis. Obviously, they can't call it an appraisal because you're not an appraiser. So the bank has come up with a different term called a broker price opinion, y'all, BPO. But y'all, that's what the BPO is. Now, I will tell you, first of all, you're not going to get rich typically doing these things, but it is a good way to pick up some extra money. You're not going to get paid the same amount an appraiser would get, because one, you're not doing near the work an appraiser would be doing, nor do you have the experience the appraiser should have. So you're not going to get paid as much, but at the end of the day, all the bank wants to know is if you're going to list a property, how much could you sell it for, right? So look, the question I know they like to ask a lot on the exam, if you're doing a BPO or a broker price opinion, who is your client? Y'all, they'll have multiple choice. You can choose from them. Well, y'all, obviously, if you understand anything I just told you, you know your client is the bank or the lender, right? Only the lenders or banks do BPOs, or y'all, broker price opinion. Now, wait a minute. Frankie, does that mean, y'all, if it's a broker price opinion, do I have to have my broker's license to do this? No. Y'all, whether you've got a salesperson's license or an associate license, it does not matter. You just have to have a real estate license, okay? Property management won't work. Y'all, if all you got is a property management license, that's not going to work. It must be a real estate sales license. Y'all, again, different states have different names for the different types of licenses. Y'all, some of them called an associate licensee, a salesperson, y'all, whatever the case may be. But y'all, at the end of the day, anybody that has a real estate sales license can do a BPO. Now, I'll also tell you, y'all, again, this is not something you can just do on the side and have a little side thing going on here. Y'all, anytime you're doing anything real estate related, it has to run through the company that you're licensed with. So for example, if you do this BPO for the bank, well, can the bank send a check directly to you? Y'all, they better not. You better make sure they don't. You're going to get in a lot of trouble if that happens, because you've cut out the company. Y'all, whether you're working with Caldwell Banker or ERA or Exit or Keller Williams, y'all, whichever it is, y'all, everything has to run through the company. So make sure when you're filling out paperwork that you're filling it out that way. It's the company. Now, you're actually doing the work, but it's the company they're hiring, and it's the company they're paying. So they'll send a check to the company, and then the company will then release to you whatever you're supposed to get. Well, Frankie, does that mean they're going to keep is that going to be split just like the commission on selling a house? That's between you and your broker in charge. Okay? Maybe not. Y'all, I would hope not, because I'm going to tell you it's not a lot of money to start with. And for the company to take part of that, it definitely, in my opinion, would not be worth doing. But anyway, to each his own. If nothing else, it's very good experience. Y'all, nothing wrong with doing BPOs if you have the time to do it. Good thing to do. Okie doke.